depending on how good of a life that you lead, you can actually walk and bring your earthly
physical body into heaven.
But it's a very rare thing, and you have to have this basically impeccable life. And so in this story,
very pure of spirit, very clean karma. If you've made mistakes, you've learned from them and grown.
And the interesting thing is, and maybe one day we can talk about it, I'll maybe go back into it, even though all of these characters that were in these books, they end up, I shouldn't tell you all this, where they end up can sometimes surprise you.
Alexa, turn off.
Oh, was the music getting too loud?
It was distracting me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
I hope you edit that out.
I'm not sure if I'll be able to, but I will do my best. The cool thing about it is these are all great concepts that are designed to make you think, right? And another really cool thing about these mythological, philosophical conversations is it's not necessarily, these people weren't necessarily real people, but it's great things for you and I to consider and to talk about and to maybe use in our own day-to-day lives and in terms of how do I respond and that sort of thing. So here we are, we have, oh, and by the way, on YouTube, we have a really cool cartoon that kind of depicts this story, if you will, and we'll put links to that one down below. So, as the brothers and their wife leave their town, Hastinapur, their country, and everybody's in tears, as soon as they leave town, Indian background music, as soon as they leave town, this dog just starts to follow them, and it's just some random stray dog. And it's, remember, this is before cars were around, so people just got up and they walked. And it's not like you're just walking to your neighbor's house like I do to Merritt's house. It's
a journey.
It's a journey. And they're in South India. And remember, India is a subcontinent. So this is like bigger than Chattanooga. This is bigger than Tennessee. Like, this is a huge area, and they're in the southern regions, and they make a trek, they make a journey, and they go all over the southern region, and they kind of go throughout India on this journey to heaven, if you will. And they go into the ocean, they go west, and guess what? The dog stays with them the whole time. This dog is just there. And they befriend the dog, the dog's there, and then they kind of make a turn to go to the north into the Himalayas, right? Because that's where heaven, the I guess doorway to heaven is into heaven. And so as they get to walk, and keep in mind these are older people, like they've already lived their lives. They left in Hastinapur. They left their Yudhishthira's grandson to be the king, the king. So these are not. It's not like young spry people. These are older people going on this long journey, and as they get towards the Himalayas, Draupadi, the wife, dies, and the brother Bhima asked Yudhishthira, who's the oldest, and he said, "Well, why aren't you stopping?" Because Yudhishthira just kept walking, even though his wife died.
Right, but he also asked why.
Yeah.
Why did she have to die? They were grieving.
Yep. All of the brothers were grieving over the loss of their wife, and Yudhishthira, without stopping, said she suffered from the sin of partiality. She always liked Arjuna, one of the brothers, the best. And so rather than being equally partial to everyone, her sin, which is what caused her to be unable to walk into heaven, was partiality. So the brothers in their grief continued walking with their dog, this new dog that's been with them for, basically, miles and miles. They continue walking up into the Himalayas. And then the next thing we know, Sahadeva dies. Wasn't it Sahadeva that was second? And Bhima asked Yudhishthira, who's continuing to walk, and they're mourning for the loss of their brother, why did Sahadeva die? And Sahadeva died because of vanity, right? It was vanity and pride. And
he was always when his brother asked, he said he was always righteous and honored everyone. and he also was respected by all. Why didn't he reach to heaven? And he was told that he was always very virtuous, no doubt that he was too honest in every aspect, but he had the depravity of pride and egotism.
Mm-hmm. So even though all of these other aspects of his life, he was, quote, right, doing the right thing, the way that Yudhishthira explained it to his brothers is he still suffered from the ego and the pride.
Right.
And so the brothers, the remaining brothers, which are now Yudhishthira the oldest, Bhima, Arjuna, and Nakula, right? Nakula? Nakula. Nakula.
I've been calling it Nakula.
Nakula. Okay. I listened to the Mahabharata and I'm trying to remember how they pronounced it. So now it's Nakula, Arjuna, Bhima, and Yudhishthira still with the dog traveling up the Himalayas. And then the next thing we know, Nakula dies.
And Nakula was the favorite by all.
Everybody loved him.
He was kind-hearted, and he considered all creatures the same, all living things the same. And so, they couldn't understand why didn't he finish his journey. And
Yudhishthira said
that he should not have been seen as difference in the face, but he had pride on his beauty, and he followed and he failed to follow Dharma by seeing the differences in skin, by considering himself above all handsome or beauty, whatever word you want to use.
So
and that's the reason he.
Yep. So he died again because of that pride. That pride and vanity. He couldn't walk into heaven. Mm-hmm. So now we've got the three oldest brothers who are also, if in the Mahabharata, they're kind of the three main characters. There's tons of characters because this is huge epic, but Arjuna, Bhima, and Yudhishthira are kind of like the three main dudes. And they're trekking up through the mountains with this little dog, and then the next thing we know, Arjuna falls and dies. Mm-hmm. And when I was reading this and listening to it, I was actually kind of shocked that Arjuna,
because he's like, I know about him more than any of the others, because he was such a warrior, a mighty warrior.
Yep, he received this blessed bow, and in the Mahabharata, which is part of where the Bhagavad Gita comes from, it's this whole conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. Mm-hmm. And so most people are familiar with Arjuna, and so you're kind of shocked since he's what you think would be following his calling, following his dharma, doing the right things. You would think he would be, kind of right there first in line to walk into heaven, but Arjuna fell. And at this point, Bhima's upset. He's lost his wife, and now his three brothers. Yudhishthira keeps walking on. And why did Arjuna die?
Because he always believed himself. He was the best archer, but he had a lot of pride and vanity in that fact.
Yeah, because he was the best archer.
He always kind of pushed his power around and boasted about that he was the finest archer.
Yep. He was in the book. It talks about how he was sent out into the different kingdoms to kind of enforce. He was like the enforcer. So Arjuna's vice, if you will, was that pride and vanity again. So that took 3 of the Pandavas. Mm-hmm. So now we're getting pretty high up in the Himalayas, and it's cold up there. The dog's with Bhima and Yudhishthira, and Bhima falls. Mm-hmm. And we're wondering, why does Bhima fall? Well, Bhima's a big dude. He was the biggest one of all the brothers. And his sin was gluttony. He loved to eat. He always ate more than he needed, is what the Yudhishthira tells us in the book.
And also he kind of pushed his power around because he was big.
Yes. Yeah, he was kind of a bully, and there's some cool scenes in the battle scene talking about
and it talked about that he didn't always consider other people's needs. Like, he took all the food that he wanted and didn't consider other people's nutritional needs.
Yes. So Bhima died. So now we're left with just Yudhishthira and this pup walking in the frigid Himalayan mountains. And the next thing we know, this magical chariot comes out of nowhere. It's like imagine a unicorn, but if a unicorn was like an elephant. And on this chariot is Indra, who is a deity. And Indra says, "Come on, Yudhishthira, I'll take you up to heaven."
It was a chariot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like what I always imagined was like a chariot that's being flown up by. Anyways.
By Pegasus.
By a Pegasus, an Indian version of Pegasus.
Yeah.
I love it. So Yudhishthira was like, sweet, all right, we'll go. Come on, pup, let's get into this magical chariot. And Indra's like, no, dogs don't come in. He's like, no pets in my car.
Abandon the dog and let's go to heaven. Get in.
Yeah.
Leave the dog.
And Yudhishthira's like, what? No way. I can't leave this dog. He's been following me for hundreds of miles. He trusts me now. He trusts me.
And he's also
for food.
dependent on me.
Yes, because they've been together so long, and now they're in the mountains. And how's this dog going to live? And Yudhishthira basically is like, heck no, I'm not leaving this dog. No. And Indra's like, come on, it's just a dog. Just leave him. Who cares?
The dog's been following him since the moment he left the kingdom, and he's lost his whole family, all his brothers and his wife, and he's not going to heaven without that dog.
That's right. How many of us are probably very similar about our pups, maybe? And it's kind of this baffling moment. And honestly, in this entire book, which is, I did the audio version, it was over 44 hours long. Mm-hmm. This one section is maybe 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's a very small section of it. But it's towards the end of this novel, and I remember thinking, way to go, Yudhishthira, because there were some times in the novel that I was like, Yudhishthira wasn't my favorite.
Why is he just leaving the people dead and moving on? Yeah.
Exactly. And poof, because this is a mythological story, the dog magically turns into another deity. Lord Dharma. So now
or Lord Yama, is that how it said? Lord Yama.
Who is Dharma. Mm-hmm. So long story, a little bit longer. Yudhishthira ends up getting to go into heaven with Indra because he's rewarded for his compassion and his loyalty to animals and people that are in need. And in case you're wondering, spoiler alert, all the brothers and the wives, they also end up in heaven. They're all in heaven, so no worries there. They just didn't get to go in their earthly bodies. Yudhishthira got to go in with his earthly body. And so that was the story for long and short of it. I thought now would be a good time to kind of have some discussions about this story. What do you think?
Yes, for sure.
So what struck you with this story? Let's maybe going back to the beginning. What struck you?
Well, I thought a lot about karma and, like I said earlier, pureness of spirit, but also like just the own human struggle about, how the wife loved Arjuna the best. Would that not be difficult to not have a favorite? And from earlier studies in the epic, she served all of her husbands and loved all of her
very
husbands.
Faithful.
But she just favored Arjuna. So that's a difficult one for me.
It is hard to not be partial.
I do have favorites. I try not to, but I do have favorites.
It's very hard to not. Yeah, the right. People that are easy to love, they're easy to love, versus the ones that maybe not so much.
So I think it speaks of unconditional love and, putting the same kind of energy towards people that maybe we don't feel as lovable about, like being in that space of unconditional love.
That one gets me there, because there are certainly people that I'd rather just.
Well, it can be heavy.
Very much
in
so.
The kind of work that we do.
Yeah.
And you do have to set boundaries, but this is a whole different story from that.
So your first thing was the partiality. So what got me at first in this particular part of the story was the decision to let go, which, by the way, is one of the legs of yoga, and there's 8 limbs of yoga, right? And so the yamas and the niyamas, those are all parts of this practice, right? And letting go is a big part, not being attached. And so all 5 of these brothers with their queen, they were like living la vida, right? They were the kings of this very, very affluent country, although it had been devastated by war, where basically all the families had died. Like, they were living in a palace, every need was met, like they were just chilling out, and they could have just done that, and gone to sleep, in their bed and then woke up in heaven without their earthly bodies, one would think, because they led such pure lives, and yet they made this decision, no, I'm going to leave my comfy bed and my, set 3 squares a day, and I want to
journey
on to heaven. And that to me was the first one. It's like, ooh, could I let go of these comforts for the hope of something else?
Well, they say that eventually on any spiritual walk, that eventually you will have to leave every attachment behind. And I mean, like, one of my gurus, like, locked up his condo in Florida, gave the key to his secretary, and walked away with nothing. Not a picture, not a book, nothing. And,
I don't know how to do that.
I mean, I've seen people, like, lose everything, and what happens after that makes or breaks, and where your Dharma is, and we're going to talk about Dharma.
About to get into Dharma, yeah.
Then that determines if that journey is one of spiritual evolution or one that tears you completely down.
Interestingly, like, your guru made that choice. Whereas, like, for Judson and I, and you guys may or may not, I've been on several podcast episodes recently talking about how we got to taking over the Thrive studio. Like, we basically had everything taken for us. And so instead of being like the brothers who walked away, we just had our jobs taken away.
Right.
And the effect of that, it didn't break us. It actually, I feel like it made us better. So that's an interesting perspective, like, letting it go. So that was my first lesson.
Yeah, you don't have to die to do it.
Nope.
But it's a death rebirth cycle.
Mm-hmm. Over and over.
Yes.
Another interesting thing that we talked about briefly before we started recording, and I asked Merritt if it struck her at all about the order in which the wife and the brothers died.
Right. And I had not considered that.
And because I thought it was interesting that partiality was considered the worst, over Bhima and his gluttony and his inability to look at other people's needs. Like, that was very interesting to me, how in the order in which they went.
Well, and probably if you listen to, if you explored this whole story, then cues for how all that went down would be clearer.
I mean, I listened and I've technically read the whole story, and it still shocked me.
So you felt like she didn't show favoritism to Arjuna?
I didn't think it was as, honestly, personally, but I'm looking at it from a Western perspective. Mm-hmm. And this is something we'll talk about a lot in these upcoming episodes. It's just different ways of examining things. Like, she was cooking for all of them, and she always reserved the most for Bhima because he was the biggest one. And so she took care of all of them. Yeah, and they actually had it arranged where she spent certain months with each of them. And she did her wifely duties for all 5 of them. And it just, in passing, is mentioned. But the fact is that made her the first to go.
So in the story, it's not obvious that she favors Arjuna?
I didn't feel like it.
Okay.
Like, it's mentioned it, but it's not like, oh, Arjuna gets the better plate. Okay. Or let me give Arjuna more time. And that was a little bit shocking. But again, remember, these are also translations from another language, and each translation is probably a little different.
Well, yes.
And parts are left out. But I thought it was I thought that part was very interesting. And then going on how pride and vanity killed 3 of the 5 brothers. Mm-hmm. Like, that to me is saying that we got to check ourselves. We got to check the pride. We got to check the ego. We talk about that all the time in yoga, right? Like, eyes on the mat. It's not a competition. It's not even a competition with yourself. Like, let the ego go.
Well, I have to look at people to see what I'm doing.
That's different.
I'm like, what?
Or one of those, like, what the heck is she doing?
What is this supposed to look like? You
Yeah.
know, that's why I look at.
Well, but that's a difference
Yeah.
than, and I'm sure we've all been in a yoga studio where there's somebody in Warrior 2 looking up, looking around, all right, I better get a little better,
Yeah.
And that's I think more of the ego. But we all suffer from this ego. And I hate using the word ego because I don't believe ego is necessarily bad.
Well, it isn't.
You need some.
If it is if it's your servant, if the ego's your servant,
Correct.
then it's great.
Yes.
But you know, if your ego, like I got a huge ego, I can't get through the door some days.
I don't believe that.
But, you know, ego, I always say, edge God out.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
The fuller you are in your ego, the less you're aligned to that divine place within that guides you from a sacred place.
To what you're supposed to be doing.
Well, not to what you're supposed to be doing, but into alignment
with it.
With that and your dharma.
That's where I was going.
The more we're full of in our head about it's got to be this way and it's got to be this way and this happened so I can't go on, just collapses you into your ego. Greed, fear, you know, there's really only two emotions, love and fear. And anything that is a fear, that's your ego in charge of things.
That's not allowing the divine God to,
right.
to I was talking with this recently, you know, every single day you're given the opportunity to answer one question to God. Do you trust me? And that's some heavy stuff because I've been guilty of this numerous times in my life. I want to control every facet. I may or may not be guilty of list making. I love lists. I love lists of lists. I don't think
list is necessarily a bad thing.
But it is if you
can't be flexible.
Exactly. And that was very, very hard for me to learn personally. That ego, I wanted to control it all. So when I was older too, when I got married, I was 30 when I got married, 31. And that's a long time to be taking care of the numero uno. Mm-hmm. And
yes.
That first few years was rough because, hey, that's not right. If it's not my way, it's the wrong way.
Right.
And that's where that list building, that ego was too much. Being flexible, allowing God to use me. Or in that particular case, you know, my way might not have been the right way. But it was. No, I'm just kidding. But that's all part of it. Like, that's a pretty heavy thought. 3 of the 5 brothers all suffered, if you will, from the same issues of pride, vanity, that egocentric nature. And if you think about it, like where we are now, it's very much me.
Yes.
And all of the political issues, and I hate even going into that, but family issues, it's very much, instead of looking out, how can I help? It's how can you help me?
Yeah, and to move from that place of, you know, non-ego or non-attachment, it's how may I serve?
Oh, beautiful. How may I serve? How can I help you?
And I think we do get just so in a routine of our day-to-day existence and the things that we need to do to take care of things that we can forget that we're all walking each other home and we're here to love and serve one another.
And imagine if everybody had that attitude.
To me, God is the strongest through service. Because when you're serving another, and you know, I keep thinking about the Australia deal and all the animals, and I've been very pulled to send energy there. I would go there if I could. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's like, what else really matters when something like that's going on than to go and help our brothers and sisters? You know, in whatever way we can.
Yeah. And you don't have to go to Australia to help.
Exactly.
There's people that you can help right next
exactly.
door. There's from a biblical standpoint, we're strongest when we're weakest. And that goes back to that whole ego. When you're like, God, I can't do this, you're going to have to do it. That's when we become strongest.
Oh my gosh, this is so totally the reading from that book I'm studying was about that. You just said the exact words from it. Should we read it?
You can if you
want.
want.
Get it?
I can certainly go get it.
Because it's that exact thing you just said, and I've been reflecting on it. Kind of going eclectic back into a different spiritual. The book is called Jesus and the Tao.
What I said was how, from a Christian perspective, we are strongest when we're weakest, when the ego is at its lowest point and we are relying on God. Some people would call it the divine to move through us so that we become the vessel with which He could use.
Yes. The disciple of life in gentleness and strength. A human being is born gentle and weak. At death, he is hard and stiff. Green plants are tender and filled with sap. At their death, they are withered and dry. Therefore, the stiff and unbending is the disciple of death. The gentle and yielding is the disciple of life. Thus, an army without flexibility never wins a battle. A tree that is unbending is easily broken. The hard and the strong will fall. The soft and the weak will overcome.
Hey, do your yoga.
Hey, by the way, do yoga. The most yielding of all things overcomes the hardest things. That which has no substance enters where there's no crevice. Hence, I know the value of acting without striving. So maybe if the brothers could have acted on the things they felt prideful about without striving to boast and, brag, then they would have been softer.
Walking in, yeah. I guess we'll never know.
Few things under heaven bring more benefit than the lessons learned in silence and the actions taken without striving.
That's a beautiful reminder of how, if you're fighting something to make it happen. So I struggle with this. If everything is in your way to make whatever it is that you want to happen, if you just keep being an obstacle, after all, maybe it's time to let it go. And as soon as you surrender, it's amazing the doors that open to it. And that's, again, going back to that whole you're strongest when you're weakest concept. Right. So,
and say the guy's, I cannot say that guy's name.
Yudhishthira?
I want to say Yudhishthira.
It's such a funny spelling, too.
So he stayed true to himself and didn't let his ego say, okay, I'm leaving the dog and ascending to heaven. Mm-hmm. He stayed true to his core of, this has been a loyal companion. He has been with me for this whole journey. I'm not leaving the dog.
Yep.
I'll stay here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that surrendering, who knows how he felt inside, because he wanted to go. He walked a long way to get there. That letting go and staying true to himself and his beliefs is what actually got him there.
Yeah. And the other cool thing to me that's letting strongest and weakest, who was the dog in this story?
He was Dharma.
That's his purpose. That was in the Indian mythology, Indian philosophy, the Dharma is your purpose, but it's a culmination of all of the choices that you make. Mm-hmm. And so talk about culminating decision points right here.
Right.
No, I'm not leaving the dog. The dog would die here in the mountains without me. I'm not leaving him. You're going to have to go on without me. And it ended up being the physical manifestation, if you will, of all of the decisions of Yudhishthira's life, good or bad. And in this particular case, it ended up being this deity, if you will, of all of the choices.
Well, and I don't think it's even necessarily that he didn't have pride and ego, mm-hmm. but through his work and his journey, he transcended that.
And he kept learning. Whereas the others, stayed in that more prideful place. So if you think about Dharma and karma, you want to explain those really fast?
Yeah, karma is kind of like you reap what you sow. What you put out comes back to you. So when you put negativity out into the universe, then it takes a lot more positivity to clean up that karma. But one thing that I really believe is that the debts and laws of karma shift and evolve as we shift and evolve. So he shifted and evolved through those things, whereas the rest of his family
stayed.
Yeah, they weren't able to do that. Dharma is the path that is yours, your life purpose. it usually has to do with service and living in alignment with spiritual nature and loving each other.
What I love about the first words that you chose for Dharma is that it's about service. It's about living for something or someone, some idea bigger than yourself. It's not here, which goes back to the ego that killed 3 of the 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about something bigger than right here.
Right. But you also have to start there. Like, you have to be pure of spirit to reach that level of Dharma. Otherwise, the work feels heavy and hard.
Or could you argue that you might, and I would argue at that point and say, I have no idea how to, quote, fix, and I hate using the word fix. So rather than figure this crap out, let me just help.
Yes.
Let me just help. I have no idea, but I know through the service, through the help, that it's going to help somebody else, and I hope that will just come back to me.
And it does.
And
that's karma.
But that, I believe, is easier.
But it also leads to Dharma.
Yeah. And I think that's an easier because I might be the only one here, but I am messed up. I have wrong thinking all the time. I do things wrong all the time, but I keep going and I'm like, okay, I'm going to help I can help this. I can do this. Let me take these steps towards it. And my idea is I hope to learn and become a better person with each of those acts of service.
I can't imagine you saying that or ever.
What? I screw up all the time.
You do wrong things. Like, what is right and what is wrong? Like, that's just a label. And the more you judge yourself...
Oh, that's a deep thought, changing the thought processes.
The less you're going to align naturally with your Dharma. But if you say, okay, well, that was out of alignment with who I am at core. It's not right or wrong. It's just something that happened. But then you use that to grow and learn. Then you're putting the action of karma into place. And you're going to naturally align with your Dharma.
I guess I disagree with there's no right or wrong. Because there are some wrongs. And in this case, and in this story, that it was clearly wrong to have the egocentric attitude. So in my case, when I am... For example, I got super annoyed yesterday. This is so silly. And honey, I love you. Judson, thank you for watching. I left the car at home Sunday. It was really busy. It was the first weekend of teacher training. And I was legit on fumes. And I left the car home on Sunday with my husband who wasn't feeling well. He's had the same crud that I've got with the kids. And I was like, surely he's going to leave the house at least once. And he can go get me some gas. And Monday I get in the car and I was still on fumes. And I was so mad. That's ego. That's so ego. Because I hadn't asked him to get me gas. I hadn't said, hey, I'm almost out of gas. Can you help me? I had just assumed that he would be like me and unable to stay at home all day because there's so many things that I have to do. And he would have realized, oh, she needs gas. I'll get gas. And that's ego. That was wrong of me. So
but
that's
in the
what I mean
broader concept of right and wrong, to me, it's more like what's really going to bite you in the ass is murder.
Of course.
And you didn't murder him.
No.
Like, you did not murder him.
For the record.
For the record. I saw him yesterday. Yeah. So,
but
I get what you're saying. My point is that as we make choices that are out of alignment with divinity, if we can observe that as you are, and, say, well, next time I'll just ask him. Yeah. Or, because, expectations and assumptions get us all in trouble.
Oh, yeah. But that goes back to that ego. The expectation, ego. Assumption, ego. And who's to say if I didn't recognize these little wrong opportunities to improve, that I wouldn't one day get to the point where I could do something egregious.
Exactly.
And that's the whole point of this everyday walk and this the introspection.
And mindfulness.
The mindfulness and the checking the ego and the reliance on the divine, the reliance on God to know, like, dude, if I do it on my own, I'm probably going to screw it up. And letting that be weak so he can be strong through me.
Right.
And that hopefully helps us to, in each of our paths, get to that heaven.
Right. And I think in marriage is a great medium for us to learn these things because, we all have things, we all have things that drive us crazy about each other,
For sure.
David leaves his shoes everywhere. It doesn't.
That would be me.
It doesn't bother him. I do it too. But when I want to clean up, I want everybody's stuff put away so I can just clean. It doesn't bother him. And so I've gotten to the point where if I want his shoes picked up, I'm perfectly willing to pick them up and put them in the... It just doesn't matter to him.
Yeah.
So why am I going to make that about him being wrong and me being right?
Perfect.
So next time, hey, sweetheart, sugar pie honey bunch, how about running up to the gas station?
Go give me some gas. I'm working all day today.
Exactly.
You go get... And so that was where I was wrong, was to do the assumption.
It wasn't wrong.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
It was not completely in alignment with the way you are at core.
I like that.
I can tell you, I've talked to a lot of people in the last few days, and there are many people doing much more wrong things than you.
Oh,
getting upset because there's not gas in the car. So
there's all relative, but we're all working towards our dharma. And
I'm not trying to minimize your journey. I just think you're a little too hard on yourself sometimes because I think you're magnificent.
Well, thank you. But then again, if I started thinking I was magnificent, I would be no better than Arjuna, Sahadeva, and Nakula. So
that's why I'm here to tell you.
to pop the balloon.
But I do think that loving ourselves and taking care of our temple and doing the things that keep us healthy is not pride and vanity.
No, and that's a good discussion of what is healthy ego, because as women especially, we are notoriously bad at taking care of ourselves. We're the caregivers, right? So when my children were sick, that's why I'm sick, because my children were sick. And Judson's a good dad, and he's there, but they're sick, they want mommy. And on a bigger perspective, how many women do you know in your circle that are like, man, I used to be in the gym all the time. I used to eat healthy. I used to do all these things to make me do better. And now I don't have time because of all of these things in my life. Well, perhaps a change of thought would be, I have to make time, because if I'm not healthy, then how can I give from an empty cup and make these babies healthy? Yeah. And I mean, again, I'm a good example of how I've messed that up, because it's easier for me. Last night it was crazy. So they got macaroni and cheese, some chicken, and a can of green beans, and that was dinner. That's not the healthiest thing on the planet. Granted, it wasn't, something worse, but it was easy. And that's that lack of self-care thing. Interesting perspective.
Yes. So let's talk about Dharma for a minute.
Okay.
Before we
I love it.
up.
I love it.
What is Dharma to you? What is your Dharma? What is your Dharma? Reflect on how to align with your life's purpose, and regardless of what you do in your life, bring that service in through your Dharma.
So what about your Dharma changing?
Oh yeah.
And each season
it evolves.
Your Dharma evolves.
I think it evolves more than anything.
And so if you are one of those people, because we all know them, that I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. That sort of thing. It doesn't, what you're supposed to do today or in 5 years may not exactly be the same thing for 15 years. But as long as you're actively working and serving in service of some sort.
Yes, the path continues to evolve. Mm-hmm. And the more that we have endless opportunities to work with people and meet people in circumstances throughout our lives to illuminate our paths. And so the people create tiny parts that cause us to recognize, okay, this is for me. This feels important. I feel good when I'm doing this. This feels right to me. Like, check yourself on those things, because that's what's illuminating your path so that you can align with your Dharma.
I love it. So, In today's story, we talked about how the 5 brothers got to heaven and their wife, and more importantly, the loyalty to one's dharma. Because Yudhishthira...
I like that.
Yudhishthira wouldn't let the doggy go. He wasn't going to leave the dog. He stayed loyal to what his truth was, what his calling was, and he was always taking care of everybody.
Have you ever noticed that dog spelled backwards is God?
I love it. I actually think I had something in my house that said that somewhere. I'm a dog and cat person, but...
Well, I am too, but I'm partial to dogs because, cats are just kind of like, whatever. If I need you, you're here to serve me. Dogs love you unconditionally. Like, it's so sad to see an abused dog.
Yeah.
But even an abused dog loves its person.
Yeah. I like to joke and say the cats keep us humble, the dogs build us up. Because to my dogs, I'm like the coolest thing ever, and my cat's like...
To be the person I am in my dog's eyes.
I know, right? Deep thoughts. So, I hope you enjoyed today's discussion and on karma, dharma, do dogs go to heaven?
A story, yeah. So if you like us, please subscribe and share this video. We would love to have you in the studio. I practice integrative energy medicine, so shoot me a comment or find me on Facebook, Merritt Maloof Plumb with the Energy Center. Let us know what you think about dharma and karma and what you thought about our little story today.
Yep. And if you are in the Chattanooga area and would like to do a meditation on perhaps the story, the dharma, karma, the ego, make sure that you come by the studio tonight at 7:45. Merritt will be leading her weekly meditation class where we try to incorporate these lessons that we're exploring personally into her meditation class. For me, I try to explore it in my physical classes. So if you are in the Chattanooga area, definitely make sure to check us out, thriveyogaandwellness.com. And if you are not, you can check us out online, thriveyogaandwellness.com.